Alright, so in this video we're going over the technique for a power clean. Now, for a full analysis and all my thoughts on why I think you should learn the Olympic lifts, you can visit this video up here. I do tend to say that I think every single athlete out there should learn certain variations of the Olympic lifts, and the power clean is the one that I usually recommend. Now, for a quick recap, I divide the benefits of the Olympic lifts into three categories: strength and power, stability and control, and kinesthetic awareness. For strength and power, there are very few things out there that are more effective than the Olympic lifts to improve these two qualities. I know there's some arguments out there comparing jumps to the power clean or to the Olympic lifts, saying that they take less to coach and they're more effective. But luckily we do have some data around this type of argument. Yes, studies have shown that you do produce more power by simply jumping, but there are other factors that come into play. The studies looked at rate of force development and total force produced, and in both of these categories the power clean was better than jumping. Not to mention the jumps are barely better than the power clean when it comes to power development. So you can't really compare these two movements. I don't think they're comparable, and I think that even if they were, the power clean beats the jumps in 2 out of 3 categories. Now, for stability and control, the Olympic lifts are multifaceted, multi-joint movements, and I don't think there's anything out there that compares to having to handle this heavy implement at high intensities, high weights, and high velocity. You know, having the ability to remain stable while moving and while exerting huge amounts of force is an indispensable skill for most athletes, especially contact athletes, and it can help us also in our daily lives. Finally, kinesthetic awareness refers more to like the full version of the movements, so taking the movements through the full range of motion, not so much the power variations like the power clean or the power snatch, but I think it's also applicable to this. You know, the lifts are extremely technical movements, and they place a huge demand on your CNS and your ability to disengage and engage different muscle groups. And being able to perform them effectively has a huge carryover to essentially every single aspect of fitness. Also, another little detail that oftentimes leads to confusion. When I say power clean or when I say power snatch, I mean catching these weights at or above parallel. And parallel is determined by the angle of the top of your thigh as it refers to the floor. So when I say clean, I do mean catch it in a squat. Saying squat clean is redundant. Saying squat snatch is redundant. Okay, you have a snatch and you have a clean, and those will be taken at a full squat. And then you have the power variations, okay, in which you'll catch them at or above parallel. And you can mix these. So you can have a hang power clean, which means catching the bar at or above parallel, and you can have a hang clean, which means catching the hang clean in a full squat. Okay, and you can have a bunch of variations, a bunch of different names. But yeah, that's a quick recap. Like I said, for the full video, you can watch it up here. Now, let's go over the technique. So the first thing would be to determine your grip. Make sure you can comfortably hold on to the front rack position with at least a couple of fingers under the bar. It is okay if you cannot keep a full grip with the bar resting on your shoulders. A lot of us will never be able to do so, and most of us will end up going to fingers anyways during the turnover. Now, if you cannot comfortably achieve any of these positions, you're probably dealing with some mobility restrictions. For most people, it will be their lats or in their thoracic spine, and you should work towards addressing those first. Now, we never want our elbows sitting inside of our hands, so make sure your grip is not too narrow. This is a common mistake, and although not as common, so is having too wide of a grip. I'd recommend starting just outside of shoulder width with the arms almost perpendicular to the bar and going from there. Now, in order to learn the lifts in general, not just the power clean, it will be helpful to follow the order of positions, movement, speed, and loading. This relates to everything, not just the lifts. Everything in athletics is often determined by positions. If you're in any sort of contact sports, you're always talking about positions. You know, if you're a rugby player, what angle is your bag on when you're going into a rock? You're not a wrestler. How do you move from one advantageous position to the other? So once you understand the positions, it's about how you get from one to the other. That's the movement. And once you start getting better at them, how fast and effective can you move from one to the other? And finally, how much power can you put behind your movements? You can adjust several things in your career: grip, stance, contact points, slight changes in lean. But if you want to be good at the lifts, you need to obey the basic principles. Usually the way the lifts are taught is a top-down approach. So if this is your first time seeing these, just know that it will probably be helpful to start from the hang position. Lower the bar and perform the lift. Then slowly progress lower and lower until you're at the floor. While learning, keep the weights light, but make sure you're using some weight. And the sets should be short, with triples and maybe fives at most. The bar should be over the middle of your foot, maybe closer to the actual balls of your feet. And you should keep your toes slightly turned outwards. Now, with the grip as we discussed earlier, and a hook grip, do use a hook grip every single time, unless you're wearing straps or your coach specifically asks you to skip it. Get used to it. There shouldn't be any arguments here, but I still always find people reluctant to use it. Know that it's not just about the grip, it is also about the amount of tension you carry in your arms. We don't want more than what is needed. Most people will complain and brag about how they don't need to use a hook grip, and then all of their lifts look like they're trying to curl the bar up. When you sit into the position, you should go down and keep a mostly upright torso, with the knees out and in line with your toes. Now this varies between people. Shorter lifters will have an easier time getting their torso to be more upright. If you happen to be a taller lifter or maybe just a long leg lifter, chances are your back will not be as upright as it might be considered ideal. At the end of the day, you just gotta find what works best for you. Now, the knee should be in between the arms and slightly over the bar. The shoulders should be almost over the wrist, perhaps slightly past them. They should also be slightly internally rotated while keeping the arms free of any slack. The key in the lifts is to use the legs. We do not want to deadlift the weight. It really is more like a squat, if you can make sense of that. If you come from the powerlifting world, you probably have heard the cue, don't squat your deadlift. And while that might be true for the deadlift, it is not true for the lifts. We do want to squat the lifts, all of them. What I mean by this is that our torso will essentially remain the same during the first pull from the floor to our knees. We do not hinge at the waist and deadlift the weight. Instead, we push hard against the ground, engaging our back and upper body to remain in position. Now, the second pull, from the knee to the power position, is the more tricky one. For this, we want to focus on keeping that bar as close as possible to our bodies. If we do this, the movement will flow. Next up is contact. Know that you need to make contact with the bar. The reason is this: if you were to stand upright while holding the bar would naturally be resting against your thighs, simply because of where our shoulders sit and the pendulum created by the arms. Now contrast this with the fact that in all of the lifts, you will actually be leaning back just slightly. When you consider these positions, the only reason why the bar does not touch you is because you're purposely, maybe not intentionally, but you're actively doing something to avoid it. Once you pass your knee, you must pull the bar in. Your back should remain engaged and you should be actively pulling that bar in. If you do this correctly, your body should continue to work towards moving upwards, and it will naturally create what is referred to as double knee bend or double knee scoop. And let me be clear, you do not do this intentionally. If you do understand the positions properly and you move effectively from one to the other, this is going to happen naturally. And it should happen. There will be some differences in the degree of flexion of this second knee bend. Usually athletes who are more hip dominant and have more powerful hips will have a greater knee bend. Meanwhile, athletes that rely more on leg drive will tend to be more upright. For more on this is a fantastic video by Catalyst Athletics that I'll link below, but in summary, he says that you need to think about this the same way you would think about a jump. And if you start a jump from what we consider the power positions, you will see that your knees will naturally just travel forward. This brings us to the last pull, from power position through the turnover. We need to remember that this motion, while performing the lifts, is intended to be directed upwards. So it is important to keep your core engaged and try to keep the torso straight. There will be a slight lean back, but this should happen from the hip without any noticeable back flexion. Once the bar lifts your hip or upper thighs, you need to use your arms to pull yourself under, and you should be aggressive in this. The whole final extension is meant to be a violent movement, under control but still violent. Remember that we do not drop under the bar, we pull ourselves under the bar. Speed comes from our upper bodies. Think about this. When your feet leave the platform, nothing is holding you to the floor. Your legs cannot bring you down, and the only thing you have is your arms. It is important to remain connected to the bar. This is another major reason as to why the arms are so critical in the third pull. You always want to be meeting the bar, never letting the bar crash into you. It is common with lighter weights to overpull and let the bar crash into us. And when the weights are light, it's not that much of an issue. But do not let it become a bad habit. And that's the video. So in one of the next few videos, I will go over some of the most common problems or faults that I see when people are learning the lifts. So let me know in the comments if you use the Olympic lifts, if you are an Olympic weightlifter, maybe if you're just learning how to perform these movements. As always, links below to all the things that I do. And yeah, thanks for watching.
It is important to draw wisdom from many different places. If we take it from only one place, it becomes rigid and stale. Understanding others, the other elements, and the other nations will help you become